Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Art Money Success Podcast. I am your hostess, Maria Brophy, and today I'm going to share with you the three best art business advice is we ever got. Is that a word? I don't know. Um, the three best art business advice pieces of words of wisdom that my husband Drew Brophy and I have ever gotten in the business of art. I'm going to start with the oldest one first, which came from the former art agent of a very famous guy named Rick Griffin, who is now passed on. Rick Griffin used to do the artwork for the Grateful Dead and Bob Dylan and all these famous musicians back in the 60s and 70s. Well, Rick Griffin had a manager who happens to live in the town that Drew and I live in. His name's Gordon. And Drew was so fortunate to meet Gordon when Drew was just a young guy, about 25 years old. And, back in those days, it was almost impossible to get good business advice on art, on the business of art, because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have artists sharing advice. Oh my gosh, back in the old days, artists would not tell you anything. They were tight lipped. Now, you can find answers to just about anything online. So Drew runs into Gordon at a party one night, and Drew was a big fan of Rick Griffin. So meeting Rick Griffin's former art agent was like meeting the Dalai Lama to Drew. And Drew was so excited. And he said, Gordon, I'm following in the footsteps of Rick Griffin. I want to become known as a surf artist. And I want to be like the best known surfboard painter in the world. And I want to do all this stuff. Do you have any advice for me? And Gordon looked at him and said, yeah, I've got advice for you. And what he told Drew is the reason we are successful today, 25 years later. He said, Drew, keep ownership to all the copyrights of every piece of art you create. If you do that, you will make money from it the rest of your life, and your kids, when you have them, will make money off of it long after you're gone. Now, Gordon knew what he was talking about because in the early days, in the 60s and 70s, Rick Griffin actually lost ownership to a lot of the copyrights of the artwork that he did because of the copyright laws back in those old days. And I happen to know Rick Griffin's daughter, who lives in Hawaii now, and we've kept in touch. And she is able to make money off of some of the artworks that Rick left behind when he passed on, but a lot of it he lost the rights to. So she can't continue on with his legacy with him gone because of copyright laws. So, that being said, I'm going to pass this on to you as the best advice you're ever going to get. Never sign your copyrights away, ever. I mean, okay, unless you're doing logo work for someone, and obviously that client has to own the copyrights to their logos. But pretty much everything else, you don't need to transfer copyrights ever. Okay, so that was good advice number one. I'm going to tell you the second best advice we ever got was widen your reach. And what that means is, look, if you're selling your art on a small scale, if you want to scale up, well, it's just a numbers game. You have to widen your reach to the number of people that you can reach. How do you do that? Well, that's a whole nother podcast, but I'll just give you the cliff notes. You do that, the more people you meet in person and online, through advertising, through collaborations with bigger entities, the more people you touch with your art, the greater, the wider your reach is. Now, another way to reach a large number of people with your art is through licensing your art. Like I talked about in my last podcast, where I talked about how Drew Brophy licensed his art for boogie boards. And over 7 years, millions of boogie boards were made with his name on them. And that widened his reach greatly without him doing it. Okay. And then the third best piece of advice is another piece of advice that I pass on to artists all the time, and most of them do not listen to it. But those of you that do listen to this next piece of advice, you will reap the long-term rewards. And this piece of advice is start a newsletter list, nurture that newsletter list, continuously add names to that newsletter list. Whenever we need a cash infusion in our business, we have slow months. Our slowest months are September and January. And sometimes during a really bad economy, we have slow months where there's not much money coming in. What do? I come up with a campaign of some sort, something special, and Drew and I will write a newsletter that comes from Drew, but I kind of do all the work for him, where he sends it to the people on his list. And he doesn't have a huge list. His list is about 5,000 people, which to some of you might sound really big, but really, our aim is 30,000. So it's going to take us a while to get there. That's another podcast. Talk about how to do that. But every time we send a newsletter with a special little campaign thing that we're doing, we sell a lot of art. So for example, just 2 weeks ago, Drew never signs his paper prints that you can order online off his website. By the way, his website is drewbrophyart.com, and you can check it out if you'd like. So every now and again, he will sign 50 paper prints. And then we let his newsletter subscribers know about it. Like, okay, now if you wanted a low price paper print that's hand signed by Drew, you better order it now. And guess what? We sell out always, sometimes within 3 hours, usually within 24 hours, totally sell out. And that's the power of the newsletter list. Now, if you are listening to this podcast on a platform where you can leave me a comment, I'd love for you to leave a comment telling me what the best advice was that you ever got on the business of art that helped you up level. And also, I'd love to invite you to hit subscribe. And hey, if you want to send me a question for a future podcast, I love answering questions. I will answer any question at all. My life is an open book. My business is an open book. If you get on my inner circle list, email list, where there's a link to sign up below. Get on my list and you can email me any question. You have complete access to me if you are on my inner circle list, and it's free. It's just a newsletter where I send you a lot of great information. Thank you for being on with me. I truly love you all. I am here to make your life easier. I believe this is my purpose in life. I know it is. And it brings me so much joy. And I'm always here for you. So you're having a problem, come to me, get in my inner circle, send me your questions. I'll share them on the podcast. I'll keep it anonymous. If you prefer, just make sure you put that in the email, and have an amazing rest of your day. I love you all.